Isn't it ironic that we can dedicate our entire lives, our entire careers, to a thing that we haven't entirely defined? We can go to school and pursue jobs and develop our skills, yet not entirely know what it is that we're pursuing. And I argue that a large percentage of us who do pursue this career don't entirely know what career it is that they're pursuing. And one of the reasons why is because of how frequently I get asked the question, when will I know if I'm an artist? How do I know when I've gotten good enough? What skill level do I need to reach? What secret ingredient? What group? What insiders club do I have to be a part of to officially be recognized or recognize myself as an artist? And it might sound like a stupid question if you think about it. Well, you draw. If you've decided to pursue a career illustrating or creating fine arts, then you're an artist. This is your career path. And I argue that that's not what it is at all. It's something far more specific. But to answer this question, the same way I answer any question is, we can't limit ourselves to one form of expression, being, in our particular case on this channel, visual arts. We have to look outside of it, think more generally, think more globally at all of the different arts or things that have been called art, and I argue falsely very often as well, and look for a commonality between all of them, such as dance, or music, or cooking, or comedy. Okay, just to name a few. There are many out there, but that's just to name just a few. We fall into the visual artist side of things. What is it that every one of these different professions have in common? Because dance is not the same as drawing, and drawing is not the same as comedy, and comedy is not the same as cooking, yet they all somehow earn the artist title. I'm very curious to know why and how that happened, and whether or not we're on the right track as far as that's concerned. Well, think about it. If we look at dance, if we look at visual arts, if we look at the performing arts in general, acting, if we look at music, every single one of these different professions, several of which I have pursued as a passionate hobby in my own life, all come down to one thing in the end. The learning curve, although very different, some physical, some have to do with your hands, some have to do more with your eyes, some have to do more with your ears or your nose or your taste buds. But it all comes down to one thing, and that is how you make other people feel with what it is that you produce. I can dance at a club. It doesn't make anybody feel anything. It's just a form of physical release. I can play on my drum set. It doesn't make me feel any way in particular. I'm just creating a rhythm with sticks on drum pads. I could make a grilled cheese sandwich. It doesn't make me feel any way in particular. It's just filling my tummy and satisfying my hunger. So what is it that separates me creating visual imagery, or me dancing in a club, or me slamming away at a drum set, from producing art, from taking that tool and creating art with it? Well, you're probably already starting to zone in on where I'm going with this, aren't you? There's a certain point where the technicality of what it is that you're producing becomes ingrained in who you are. There's a certain point where the fundamentals inside you artistically are so solid and so part of your DNA that you start to step away from it You don't have to think about rhythms. You don't have to coordinate your hands and your feet. You don't have to train your muscles in your hands. You don't have to know where to focus. All of that becomes a part of who you are. It becomes a part of your daily life because you are so trained and so finely tuned in this particular form of expression that something else starts to come out of you. You start to step away from the technique and you start to focus more on making people feel something or yourself with what it is that you're producing. And there's the magic ingredient. It has nothing to do with a special skill. It has nothing to do with a special, particular professional level. It has to do with what you do with those skills and what your desire is with those skills once you reach a certain point. Now, I have personally never gone on Wiki or Webster's Dictionary or Google, for that matter, and looked up what is art. And it might very well happen, it might ironically be exactly what it is that I'm discovering with you today. But I don't care. Because to me, art production, being an artist or artistic expression, is something that you have to learn with your body, not with your mind. And I think that this is where a lot of artistic institutions or visual arts institutions, I'm trying to find the most diplomatic term I can find for this, confuse art, true art, with different things. And there are, ladies and gentlemen, plenty of posers in every industry. People who get it and truly are artists, and people who try to emulate what being an artist is, and some people who are admittedly, unapologetically not artists at all, and have incredibly successful careers, not producing art, yet still being very involved in the visual imagery profession. Art can come in any form. And when somebody comes to me and says, "When will I know if I'm an artist?" they're asking the wrong question. In my personal opinion, you can uncover your artistic abilities, but you can't train yourself to become an artist in the sense that people think. You can learn the tools for visual expression, absolutely. But it has to be authentic. It has to be authentic within you to express yourself in an emotional way. To focus on a feeling, on an emotion, to be able to convey that authentic feeling and emotion to others in a way that they feel and understand. And how you express yourself, how you decide to capture a feeling or an emotion or a moment in time that other people can adhere to and feel the same way you did is the great challenge. But it has to come from an authentic place. The same way I can fake a smile, the same way I can pretend to be sweet, the same way I can pretend to be professional, but deep down inside, I and everybody else knows I'm not quite there. If I'm faking it, if I'm making it up, if I'm pretending, the world knows. Some people are better at convincing others than some, but when it comes to true artistic expression, you can't fake it. And trust me, there are plenty of fakers out there. They exist in abundance. I'll give you a few examples. A few examples of visual artists that might not necessarily produce the most visually impressive technical imagery, yet can capture something deeper that is very hard to express in words. Almost as if they can't be expressed in words, as if we don't necessarily have the vocabulary to describe certain specific things. Take Pascal Campion, for instance. Now, there's many examples, but I'm just thinking of a few that have struck me over the years emotionally. If you look at Pascal Campion, he himself admits he's not the most technically advanced draftsman out there. You know, his anatomy isn't, he's not Proco level anatomy. He's, his value and his rendering is not spot on, flawlessly, beautifully perfect like Anthony Jones. That's not what he's about. But when you look at his paintings, or you look not his paintings, but if you look at his illustrations, he captures moment, a nostalgia, a feeling, an intimacy that's very pure. A couple sitting in a cafe, enjoying a coffee together, chatting and smiling together. A boyfriend and girlfriend who are hugging in the morning. A woman in her underwear in the morning in the kitchen who's getting a treat for her dog. A father and daughter walking through the leaves together across an autumn bridge. Somebody sitting on a balcony in the middle of downtown. Very simplistic, very minimalistic drawings, but really capture the depth of the human experience in the simplest form. He's not trying to embellish. He's not trying to show off. He's not trying to flex his artistic muscles. He's trying to capture something authentic, and he manages it beautifully. Now let's switch the coin and look at somebody entirely different. Somebody whose paintings, a very celebrated master painter, classic master painter, Italian, who when you look at his work at first, you might think to yourself, meh, it looks like shit. The first impression you might get from looking at this guy's artwork is, well, that kind of looks like crap. It's not very technically impressive. And I'm talking about Modigliani, the fine artist Modigliani. Now, if you look at Modigliani's work, technically speaking, and even aesthetically, he might not produce the most attractive looking artwork. But what he's capturing, and which I venture you even attempt to try to capture to the same level of mastery, is the soul, the energy of a human. And very often, if you know anything about Modigliani, you could call him an artist who captures eroticism, sexual stimulation. He would capture a woman who's sexually aroused, and he was known for locking himself in a room with his model. He wanted absolute privacy, and a lot of people speculated that he might have had affairs with these women or slept with them. Who knows? Maybe yes, maybe no. But when you look at these paintings of these women, you can feel so many different, very palpable, immediate emotions, very authentic emotions, where you look and you can feel that woman's arousal. And he captured it with color. It's powerful. But would I hang his painting on the wall? Maybe out of fascination. It wouldn't be a decorative piece, not in my home, but it definitely captures a moment in time that you can relive and feel. Take another one. Zdzisław Beksiński, the Polish artist. You could call him a dark surrealist, fantasy surrealist, abstract expressionist, whatever. Doesn't matter. When I look at Beksiński's work, it's random, sometimes dark, macabre type of imagery, like bones and knuckles and dark scenes and all kinds of different things. It's hard to describe. Sometimes it's just textures. Sometimes it's just patterns. And there's many artists that do stuff like that all the time, that paint things that have these types of textures as well. But when I look at Beksiński's work, what moves me is not the visual imagery, although quite beautiful, aesthetically to me at least, but he captures a rawness of humanity. Two lovers in the throes of passion, the way hands press against skin, the weight of death and despair, the loneliness, the vastness of the world. I feel all of these things in his artwork that just, it takes my breath away. And I can't describe or try to imitate or capture what it is that he's painted, because it's so authentically deep within him that only he will truly ever know. And unfortunately, the secret is lost with him since his passing. But he was just a humble, gifted man who captured his feelings, his thoughts, his naughtiness, his darkness, his happiness, his lovingness on canvas in abstract ways that can't be described apart from just feeling it or not. And art in and of itself can or cannot be understood, interpreted, or appreciated from other people. I'm sure there's many people who will look, I'm sure you might look at a Bucci painting and think it's boring and empty to you. And there's other, you might look at Pascal Campion's and feel nothing. You might look at Modigliani's work and think it's some of the most technically beautiful stuff you've ever seen in your life, regardless of what I'm talking about. There's an element of the personal relationship you have with a person's artwork depending on what it is that they're trying to express. It's personal. The same way I might get along with one person and not get along with somebody else. I might appreciate or not appreciate a person's artwork. Sometimes I can appreciate their talent, but I hate them for what it is they're expressing. To me, it might make them very unpleasant, very distasteful human beings that I would not like in real life, but can absolutely, completely be breathtaken by their ability to capture that. Because how the hell do you capture the human soul? Well, some people have that gift, even though they're complete and utter douchebags in real life. Their douchebaggery is all over their artwork, but they captured it in an absolutely brilliant way. And it's tragic that somebody that horrible is that reputable at the same time. But that's art sometimes. And like I've said, I've seen this in many different art forms. I've seen this in dance. A perfect example is my girlfriend. She now works in PR and consulting, but she has a lifetime of artistic training in dance. She studied ballet. She studied contemporary dance. So it's not every day I get to see her dance, but it's in her. And I remember once she did a dance. We were just kind of goofing off as a family, and we were all doing our little dance performance thing in the living room. And she did a dance for my daughter, Emily. And I couldn't describe it any other way, but she was love. And I think about it to this day. I might have even spoken about it in the past, but when she expresses herself with her body through dance, I'm speechless. I literally am speechless. And even though she works in a consulting firm right now, she has the soul of an artist, and there's nothing else to say about that. So how do you distinguish? Here's that fine line. Here's the controversy of what I'm talking about here today. And that is, when is it real, authentic expression and art? And when is it bullshit? When is it fakery? When is it pretentious, melodramatic garbage? Where do you draw that line? Well, this is a line that gets toyed with constantly. And a very good example of this type of playing around with art, or at least the definition of it, is walking into a contemporary art museum. Now, I've been to the Contemporary Art Museum in my life maybe 15, 20 times. And I only once went voluntarily. Every other time I went into a contemporary art museum, I rolled my eyes and let out a big sigh, almost as if I was about to show up for an extra long double shift at the factory. I was like, oh, here we go again, right? And I remember the last time I went to the Montreal Contemporary Art Museum was, again, with my girlfriend. We went for this red carpet event. Her company had set up this big PR event, and we were there as guests. And, well, first of all, it was full of contemporary art. And they also did a contemporary dance performance in the middle of they had this kind of like club dance hall downstairs where they had music and stuff like that in the bar, and they did a contemporary dance performance. And walking around this gallery exhibit, just looking around at all the photography and the paintings and the drawings and whatever art installations they had there, how can I describe this? It was utter garbage. It was insultingly bad garbage. And they were pointless, meaningless stupidity with big fancy labels and security guards guarding it. I could have spilt my coffee on it and it would have given it more depth than the shit I was looking at. Because it's people who try to imitate art without understanding the authenticity behind it. It's people who are trying to imitate the movements. It's like me copying, it's like me plagiarizing somebody else's artwork, but putting my own little unique twist on it and calling it art. It's not art because I'm not that person. It's not art because I don't understand the thought and the feeling and the lifestyle and the events that led up to that expression, that moment. And when you look at the painting, it's quite, or painting or sound art installation or dance video installation or whatever it is you're looking at, you don't feel anything. I remember one in particular. It was this glass box, this transparent glass box, and they had speakers attached to the outside of it. And you could see the inside of it where there were kind of like wires hooked up to the speakers. And it had this perimeter around it. You weren't allowed to come close or touch it. And as you walk around it, you hear whisperings of people. Actually, I'll give you your little ASMR moment here for a second. I'm like, yeah. Yeah, okay, true. What? Like mumblings of people. And I like to give things the benefit of the doubt. I didn't, yes, okay, I have a bit of a bias against a lot of contemporary art crap out there, but I sat outside of it and I sat there and I listened to it for 15 minutes. Closed my eyes, allowed myself to get lost in the moment created by these sounds. Whatever it is that the artist was trying to, whatever world that artist was trying to bring me into. And I closed my eyes for 15 minutes and I listened to all these different random sounds of traffic and children and dogs and people whispering and clocks ticking and everything. And I opened my eyes after 15 minutes. I went, wow, I didn't feel a goddamn thing. It was just random bullshit. And then I walk into this other room and I'm not joking. I walk into this other room and there's a person standing. It's this video in black and white. It looks like it was shot back in the 1930s. It has this kind of vintage look. And there's somebody in one of those contemporary art leotards, contemporary dance leotards, black, always in black with the long black hair, right? And she's taking a step to the front, to the side, to the back, to the left, to the right, front, back, back, front, right, left, left, front, right, back, back, front, left, right, right, left, front. Okay, and just did this pattern, and I sat there again for another. I endured about 5 minutes of that, and then I went, fuck, I gotta get out of this place. I gotta get out of this place. And big, big, big plaques on the front that have this long description of the darkness within inside that's just being unleashed. The steps representing the steps forward and back through. Shut up. Shut up. If you need to explain something, if you need to write a novel to express what it is the person was actually trying to convey, then they're not doing their job. Then they're not expressing themselves. You shouldn't have to. A person should walk into there, and once they let themselves go and get lost into the piece, should feel themselves transported to something, to some feeling, to something in particular. Not just be subject to this random bullshit. And then we went downstairs back to the club. Neon lights, open bar. Boy, did they spike those those drinks. Damn, did they spike those drinks? Whew, that was the highlight of the night. But then they create a little separation, little circle in the middle of the dance floor, and they put on some music, some random cello music, classical cello, I guess, and then that was mixed in with some random sounds. So my watch here keeps making noise. It's driving me nuts here. Boop. There we go. So we sit around, and then it breaks into this kind of like techno abstract pop stuff. You can kind of imagine some abstract music as well. And they all get in a circle, and they're looking at each other, and they're stretching out their arms with this look of horror and longing. And there's a person in the middle, and then somebody takes something that looks like something like a hacky sack, like a potato sack, and somebody throws it in the middle of the floor, and then they all kind of start to gather around it and look at it like wild animals with their asses in the air. And my girlfriend's next to me confided she's well trained in contemporary dance. So I'm sitting there looking at it, thinking to myself, I'm not going to say anything because this isn't my area of expertise. And we watched the whole 20-minute performance. Lots of melodrama, and somebody yells and screams out loud at one point. Ah! One of the dancers, very jarring. And then it ends, and everybody goes, bravo, bravo, bravo. All of these businessmen and women, bravo, bravo, while they're all drunk in their ties. And then I look over at Jen, and she looks at me, and she just nods her head. She goes, no, that was bullshit. I went, thank you, because it looked like bullshit to me. I was afraid to say, I didn't want to sound ignorant, but yeah, it was bullshit. She goes, yeah, no, it was complete garbage. They didn't know what the hell they were doing. It was just made up melodramatic bullshit. I went, yeah, just like everything else in this museum. If I reach out to you and I use whichever form of expression I have to capture a moment of feeling in you, that is extremely challenging to do. It takes a lot of thought. It takes a lot of skill. It takes a lot of training. It takes a lot of focus. It takes a lot of sacrifice. It takes a lot of time. And I might try 50 times and fail, but then that last time, manage to figure it out and express it to you in a way that pulls the lungs out of your body. It takes the strength out of your legs. It just weakens you with emotion. It might make you weep. It might make you laugh. It doesn't matter. But that is art. Art is when you actually convey and capture that feeling. Art is when you actually go through the time and effort and patience it takes to be able to capture somebody else's heart. That's what art is. But not everybody produces it. The ones, as you can see, that offend me are the ones that claim to be artists, but have no clue what art is. But there's another side to this. There's illustration. There is design. And design is very often confused with art. You see somebody who produces absolutely gorgeous designs, and they go, oh my God, this person's an amazing artist. Yeah, okay, fine. As a general term, you can call them an artist because they're producing pictures. But I take the word artist very seriously. Not because I think that being an artist is superior from being a designer. Not at all. I am as impressed with art as I am with design. All the time. But a designer does not pretend to be an artist when they truly understand what design is. Design is the foundation, the backbone of visual mastery. It is conveying and capturing the aesthetic, the movement, the form, the texture, the rhythm of life, and conveying it in the visual form. It's incredibly challenging, incredibly technical. It takes a lifetime of experience to master it. But its focus is in capturing visual imagery. Its focus is in technical mastery. Its focus is not in capturing feeling and emotion. It isn't reaching deep down inside to convey a feeling or capture an era in a way that can only be felt. It's something that's openly accessible to anybody and everybody, but only very few can marvel at its beauty and its magnificence. One is not superior from the other. They are two different personality types. Why it's so crucially important to make this distinction is because when somebody comes up to me and says, "When will I know when I'm an artist?" You might already be one. You might have been one since you were 5 years old, for all I know. I won't be able to tell if you're an artist unless I speak to you, unless I find out what your goals are. But you won't necessarily even know what your goals are until you have taken your hand at training yourself in the fundamentals of drawing and painting. You might even realize at a certain point in your life that drawing and painting isn't necessarily your purest form of expression. You might pick up a pair of drumsticks one day and realize that you were a drummer your whole life. You might get on a dance floor one day and realize that you're actually a dancer and not a painter at all. Because a lot of these emotions, a lot of these feelings that drive us towards expression are very similar between different professions. The same thing that drives me on an artistic level, the same part of my brain that functions as a visual artist, also is exactly the same part of my brain that is required to dance. Is exactly the same part of my brain that it takes to play guitar or act or sing. They come from the same place. Because I possess that DNA in me for emotional expression, at least in the artistic form, that emotion comes out in the way I move when I'm on the dance floor. That emotion comes out for me when I play the guitar or I play the drums. But as a professional, I recognize the fact that I do not possess the technical skill in dance or drumming or guitar or acting to be able to express myself with the same level of freedom and purity that I can with a paintbrush, because I've been training in it and I have an education in it that I've pursued my whole life. Can I? I know I'm very capable of, and I know that if I did decide one day to pursue dance on a more professional level, would I ever end up on a stage performing? Most likely not, because I'm 43 now. But I know how to pursue dance because of the type of painter I am. I know how to pursue music because of the type of painter I am, because they are both two ways of expressing the same thing, what's deep down inside. What I can express on the dance floor is very different from what I can express with a paintbrush, and I express extremely different things on the dance floor that I do with a paintbrush, but they both come from the same core emotionally. Ask yourself the question, who am I as a person? Am I an incredibly emotional, expressive person who uses art as a tool to express myself, but you might be frustrated because every single time you pick up your paintbrush to express yourself, the words just don't come out the way you want them to? Do you ever deal with that frustration? That's probably because you're a closet artist, but you just don't have the training for it yet. You haven't brought your technical skill up to the right level yet. Or maybe you really don't care that much about expressing yourself artistically, but oh my God, to create landscapes that feel like you can walk through them in the mist and the clouds and the rolling hills and the rotting wood on the bridge and the moss and all of these beautiful things. You're just trying to capture beautiful, evocative imagery and colors. Well, maybe you're more of a designer. Or maybe you're a bit of both. But it's that emotional core of yours that's really going to help you determine which way you go with it. And it's also going to help you determine how you find your most productive self as a professional. An artist needs their emotion to be at the core of their creation. It is the foundation of what it is that they create. If I get on a dance floor, all technicality aside, or lack thereof, and I put on a song, when I ignore the fact that I have no professional training or any real seriously technical skill whatsoever, when I connect to the right song and the right music, the right tempo, the right feeling, the right mood at the right time, and I allow myself to just let go and be, then I find that same artistic, emotional, personal euphoria that that feeds my energy and feeds my drive endlessly. It's almost as if I can go on autopilot. Same thing happens with music. Sometimes I'm just sitting there and playing over the same chords, same scale, over again. But then I put on a song and I just let it go. And I start to feel the music as a form of expression. And it transports me. Even Meryl Streep described, I always reference her with regards to art, regards to acting. Acting is not about acting. Acting is about being. You learn all of these technicalities of acting, about presentation, about body language, about all of these different subtleties and, multiple different expressions, multi-expressions that are all happening at the same time. How you convey three things simultaneously. A person with a certain lifestyle in this certain environment who's expressing this particular thing at this particular time. Incredibly technically challenging performance. But when it all comes down to it, you just are. And you become your authentic self. You take off your acting face and you put on your being face. And this is why actors like Heath Ledger, for instance, could be so overwhelmed by a role like the Joker, putting yourself inside the mind of a psychopath, living as a method actor inside the mind of a psychopath. Christian Bale, becoming an anorexic, becoming somebody who's very, very messed up. He had to become that because when he got in front of the camera, it was no longer about pretending. It was no longer about acting. It was about being. It was about living the lifestyle, because when people would look at him and see the struggle and the anguish inside that guy's mind, they had to feel it as if they were literally walking inside the world of a person who they would never, ever, under normal circumstances, be able to see. You can make that distinction very easily, can't you? But you can look at something that's just a form of fantastic entertainment, beautifully made, beautifully acted, and then others that are literally works of art. And you have to be able to make that distinction between the two. So when it comes to your own creations, ask yourself the question, what drives me? If the emotion drives you, then whenever you pick up your paintbrush, confided you have the training, don't get frustrated if you don't. We all have to pay our dues, right? But when you pick up that paintbrush, start with the feeling. Start with the feeling, and then ask yourself the question, how do I take that feeling and turn it into images? How, furthermore, can I take these feelings and convey them in a way that other people feel them too? That's the real challenge. You can feel a lot, but you don't want those feelings to be inside your head. The same way an actor can feel a lot inside their head, but then when they act, their eyes are blank. That emotion is not conveyed out to the audience. Their audience is not feeling what they feel, and they have to be able to make that, they have to be able to see the world through the eyes of others, right? Same thing applies to visual arts. You want to be able to visualize your own work. Take a third person perspective, an outsider's view of your own work, and ask yourself the question, will they feel what I'm feeling, or is this all in my head? It's amazing how many times people say, oh, this is a story about a guy whose wife passed away and he's in anguish and he's alone in the forest, and I just see a guy walking through a forest. I don't feel the emotion. I don't see the face, the colors, the light, the composition, the texture, Nothing is conveying that emotion. The narrative is all inside the artist's head, and they haven't yet learned how to bring that feeling onto the page. They're incredibly emotional people. They have the soul of an artist. They have the heart of an artist. They just haven't learned how to put that down on paper yet. And other artists that I have to struggle to keep up with their technical skill. It's a challenge as a teacher to be able to offer them the growth that their insatiable minds need to be able to produce the most beautiful designs they can. And I put my emotional self aside, and I just revel in the joy of designing, which is an incredibly satisfying and fulfilling experience. And I keep saying that because I don't want you to confuse me describing art as the purest form of visual expression. I find that's a reputation that the fine arts community have exploited endlessly, and why illustrators like myself, but I would say that I have a lot of fine artists in me as well, both in terms of training and family. But I grew up thinking that fine arts was the only true form of art, as did artists like John Howe, for instance, had to come to terms with the fact that they were, quote, just illustrators. No, illustrators are not just illustrators. They are equally valuable and equally meaningful and equally important artists as are fine artists. It's just a different way of thinking. It's a different way of expressing, and that's all it is. If you're an artist, you know it. You'll know it even if you're a computer programmer by profession. You'll know it even if you're working in PR as a consultant. You'll know it if you're an electrician or a mechanic. An artist, you can tell an artist when you meet them just by having a conversation with them. And as soon as they open their mouth and they start to express themselves with feeling, you know who you're talking to. You know who you're talking to right away. Are you an artist? I'm sure at this point you can answer that question yourself, can't you? So why don't you? All right? And with that said, thank you, as always, for joining me. I love you all from the bottom of my heart, and happy painting. Take care.